For the clavicle, as they say that it is having the membrano cartilaginous ossification. It's membrano-cartilaginous ossification. So clavicle partly ossifies in the membrane, and partly the clavicle ossifies in the cartilage. If I just draw this schematic picture for you, so let us presume if this is the clavicle here, and here is the two ends. Let's say this is the sternal end of the clavicle, forming the sternoclavicular joint, and let us say this here is the acromial end, the lateral end or the acromial end. So sternal end and the acromial end. So what you will see that majority of the clavicle, like the lateral 3/4 of it, majority of the clavicle, it ossifies in the membrane. So it undergoes the membranous ossification. It undergoes membranous ossification, whereas it's the medial end here, or the sternal end you can say, which undergoes the cartilaginous ossification. Right? So the major lateral part under membranous ossification, and the medial part, the medial sternal end, it undergoes the cartilaginous ossification. And just to tell you guys, right now I'm not able to see the Facebook screen. So if you're posting any questions or query in between, I'll not be able to see it. So once I'm finished with the session, you can always post your queries in the comment box, and I'll answer you. So for now, just sit back, relax, and just look what I'm discussing here, and you can keep your questions ready once I'm done with the session. In the clavicle, guys, the ossification, there are actually, some says there are 3 centers, some say there are 4 centers of ossification. So let me go with 4. So there are 4 centers for ossification. There are 2 primary centers for the major part of the shaft here. So we have these 2 primary centers for ossification, and these primary centers for ossification, they appear from in between 5th to 6th week of intrauterine life. Writing IUL, the 5th to 6th week of intrauterine life, the primary center, and these primary center, they fuse with each other. They fused by the 45th day of intrauterine life only. By the 45th day of intrauterine life only. So they appear and then they fuse. That is about the primary center of ossification. Secondary center of ossification, the one center which is definitely present is toward the medial end. So we have one secondary center for the medial end here. So we have one secondary center for this sternal end or medial end. And this secondary center, this is the one which appears at the age of almost 20 years of postnatal life, of course, and it is fused by the age of 25 years. These numbers might vary a little bit between different authors having different numbers. So I'm quoting these numbers from the whatever standard text I follow. So the medial end, the sternal end, one secondary center appears by the age of 20 and it is fused by the 25th year. We need to know about the secondary and the primary center of ossification, because when you're looking at a radiograph, you should be able to identify the age of that person by looking at the bones merely. So that you should know that when the secondary centers are appearing, that makes them very important. From the forensic point of view, that is also an important thing to know about the secondary center of ossification. The medial end, this one here, guys, the acromial, the lateral end, that is the acromial end here. We also have a secondary center here. So we have one secondary center here also, which again appears at the age of 20, and it is fused immediately. It just appears and it immediately, just after the period or the 20th year only, and within 20th year only, it fuses with the rest of the shaft. So we have like 4 centers. We say that acromial end or this lateral end may or may not, that's a center which is not always present, the secondary center, but we usually have this 2 primary center of ossification for the major shaft of the clavicle. The medial end, the sternal end, we have one secondary center, and the lateral end, that is acromial end, may have one more center for secondary center of ossification, which appears by the age of 20 and fused immediately. Right? So this is about something about the clavicle. The one bone which is very important from the ossification point of view is scapula. So let us quickly talk about the scapular ossification, guys. Let's talk about the ossification of the scapula. So guys, for the scapula, we have actually 8 centers of ossification, and out of those 8 centers, we got one primary center. There is one primary center, and we have 7 secondary centers of ossification. One primary and 7 secondary centers. It's better if you remember it with the help of a diagram here. So let's say if I'm just drawing this posterior view of the scapula, there we go. This is the inferior angle here. This here is the glenoid cavity. There is the acromion process. This here is coracoid. That's the superior border. So that's roughly, this is a scapula here. So guys, the primary center of ossification, the one primary center that we said, we have it for the body. So there is one primary center. I'm drawing it on the body only. Let's say this is the primary center we're talking about. And this primary center of ossification, it appears at around 8th week of intrauterine life. So the primary center, the one primary center we have, and that is for the body, as you can see, that appears around 8th week of intrauterine life, and it is fused with the rest of the things around by the age of 15. th year of postnatal life, it fused by the age of the 15th year. Secondary center of ossification. Now what is interesting here is the secondary center of ossification. Now we have one secondary center for the medial border. Now that's the medial border here. I'm just trying to use a different color. So this is a medial border. So guys, medial border is having one secondary center. Then we have one secondary center which is for the inferior angle. I'm just highlighting this inferior angle part. Again, there is a one secondary center for ossification for the inferior angle. Then we have a secondary center of ossification which is for the glenoid cavity. To be more precise, they usually say it's a lower part of the glenoid cavity, not the entire, but in general we simply say glenoid cavity. So for the glenoid cavity, again there is one secondary center. So till now 3. As we said, we have 7 secondary centers of ossification. So we have one for the medial border, one for inferior angle, and one we have for the glenoid cavity. Don't worry about the lateral border and the upper border. Lateral border and upper border, they are basically part of the body only. So they are formed with the body itself. That is from the primary center. Now the coracoid process and acromion process. The important thing, the coracoid and the acromion process, guys, this we have 2 centers, 2 secondary centers. 2 secondary center for this coracoid process. And similarly, we have 2 secondary centers for the acromion process. I'm just trying to use the different colors. So for the acromion process, again we have 2 secondary centers. Right, so it first justified the fact when we said we have 7 secondary center of ossification. They might ask this question that those centers are for what part of the scapula? 1 for medial border, 1 for inferior angle, 1 for glenoid cavity, 2 for coracoid process, and 2 for acromion process. So these are the 7 centers of ossification. Primary center, it appeared obviously in the intrauterine life, that is 8th week. Out of the 2 coracoid process center of ossification, the secondary center, one of the center, one center, it appears in the first year of postnatal life. It appears in the first year of postnatal life, and then it is fused with the rest of the scapula by the age of 15. Fused by 15th or 16th year of age. So I'm talking about out of the two centers, for the two secondary center for the coracoid process, one appears in the first year of the postnatal life, and then it is fused with the rest of the scapula by the age of 15. And for the remaining secondary center of ossification, you don't have to go into that detail. You just remember that remaining all the secondary center, remaining 6 secondary center that we have, they all appear at puberty and they're fused by the age of 20. So let me write that for you, that rest all secondary centers appears at puberty, in and around puberty actually, and they're fused by 20th year. They're fused by the 20th year. I'm kind of sure that examiner will not go into the very detail of that, when exactly the medial border and the inferior angle they appear from. So just you can remember that puberty, so some appears at 14, some at 15, some at 16, but the puberty, saying puberty is good enough here, that they appear at puberty and fused with the rest of the scapula by the age of 20th year. So this is about the ossification of the scapula. Let's have a very quick recap here. So what we said, we have one primary center, that is for the body, and the body part here, it also includes the upper border and the lateral border, because there is no separate center for it. Then we have 7 secondary centers, and out of those 7 secondary center, 1 for medial border, 1 for inferior angle, 1 for glenoid cavity, 2 for coracoid, and 2 for acromion process. Out of these 7 center, 1 center for coracoid process, it appears in the first year of postnatal life and fused by the 15th year. By the time puberty, it is fused already. Rest of the secondary center appears then. So that is a time when rest of the secondary centers are coming up. That is at the time of the puberty, and they are fused by the age of 20 years. That is about some important points about the ossification of the scapula. Number 3, the third bone that we gonna consider today, that is humerus. Now guys, if I for the humerus, I can say that we have one primary center, and then we have these secondary center, the 7 secondary centers, which are distributed in the upper and the lower part. So let me just again show it diagrammatically here. Let us say this is the shaft of the humerus here. Here's that's a medial epicondyle. Here is a trochlea. That's the capitulum toward the lateral side. That's the lateral epicondyle. So roughly, let's say this is that's the humerus you're looking at, and here's the head. So we got one primary center of ossification, obviously for the shaft, for the diaphysis. And once again, this primary center, it appears at the age of 8th week of intrauterine life. 8th week of intrauterine life. That's a primary center here. When we talk about the secondary center, guys, upper end and the lower end. Like upper end is having 3 secondary center of ossification, and lower end is again having like again we have 4 secondary center of ossification. Now upper end, what are the centers here? Now this here is the greater tubercle, and the one which is placed more anteriorly, that is the lesser tubercle, and here's the head. So let me write that. For the secondary center of ossification, we have one for the head, one secondary center for the head, one for the greater tubercle. As you know, greater tubercle is more laterally placed. We'll be discussing it in the osteology part. That is one secondary center for the greater tubercle, and then we have one secondary center for the lesser tubercle also. One secondary center for the lesser tubercle. And what you can say, that's H, that is head, G, greater tubercle, L, lesser tubercle. This HGL, head, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, the time of the center to appear, they appear at the age of 1, 3 and 5. First year, third year, and 5th year of postnatal life. These are the secondary center of ossification which appears at the age of 1, 3 and 5. Head 1st year, greater tubercle approximately 3rd year, and lesser tubercle by the age of 5th year. 1, 3 and 5, head, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle. We are talking about the secondary center, these three. Now when we talk about the secondary center for the lower end, it is wise to discuss those secondary center with the radius and ulna upper end also, because when you will be looking at the radiograph, you will not be looking at the lower end of humerus alone. You must be looking at the radial head and the olecranon process. So there's a way to remember the lower end of the humerus and the upper end of the radius and ulna, their ossification in a way, in a conjunctive way. So what I'm going to do here, guys, if I just draw the radius and ulna here. Now let us say this here is the radial head, the one which is attached to the capitulum. This will be the radial head. Here's the radius here. And the one which will be attached to this trochlea, that will be the olecranon. That will be the olecranon process. The process is projecting backwards like this. I hope you heard of this mnemonic called as a CRITO. CRITOE. This is a mnemonic which will help you remember the secondary center of ossification, the CRITO. CRITOE. CRITO. What is C, guys? C is this capitulum part. So C corresponds to the capitulum. And this center for the capitulum, it appears at the age of 1. 1st year of postnatal life, there is a secondary center of ossification for the capitulum. Appears. That's not the time for the fusion. R is for this. R is for what? R is for the radial head. Radial head. Secondary center of ossification for the radial head appears at the age of 3. It's just the game of odd numbers, guys. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, like that. Okay. I. The word I we are using here, I, for this. Actually, I is for the internal epicondyle. Needless to say, internal epicondyle is which one? That is a medial epicondyle. You say internal epicondyle or medial epicondyle, and that appears by the age of 5. CRITO. T. T is for what? T is for this trochlea, this pulley shape that we have, this trochlea. The secondary center for the trochlea appears at the age of 7. O is for this, that is olecranon process. Olecranon process can be better appreciated from the posterior side. 9 years. Olecranon process. And E. E is for this. E stands for the external epicondyle. External epicondyle, that is nothing but the lateral epicondyle we're talking about. This external or the lateral epicondyle, that's the latest to appear, and that is by the age of 11. So that is a CRITO. C, it's for the capitulum, the 1st year. Then we have this R, that is radial head. Radial head appears at the age of 3. Then we got this I, that is internal epicondyle or medial epicondyle, that appears at the age of 5. Then we have this trochlea, this pulley shaped trochlea, which is having one flange larger than other. At the age of 7, we got this olecranon process. That olecranon process, as I said, can be appreciated better from the posterior side at the age of 9. And finally, we have this lateral epicondyle, or you can say external epicondyle, this lateral or external epicondyle, which appears by the age of 11. So CRITO, CRITO. So they might give you a radiograph, and by looking at that, what can be seen or what cannot be seen, you can guess the age of the child, that which centers have appeared and which are not present there. So if you're looking at only the capitulum, radial head, and medial epicondyle, and not the trochlea, so that means the age is somewhere between 5 to 6 years. So that's one example here. We'll be talking about the other centers of ossification for the radius and ulna in our next section, that is next week. So right now, as I said, our focus is on the scapula, clavicle, humerus, and the muscles which are actually attached in that region. So that is first part of this discussion, guys, which is about the ossification center, the primary and the secondary center of ossification. Now let me use some images. I should tell you one more thing here. These are the time when these centers they appear. These are the time when these centers appear. All these centers, they will be fused to the shaft. They will fuse to the shaft by the age of 16 to 17 years. By the age of 16 to 17th year, all these will be ultimately attached to the primary center, which is giving a diaphysis. So they will be attached to the diaphysis portion. Chale guys, moving on. So from the ossification part, I hope you understood this ossification of these three bones. On the ossification, there are so many numbers in the ossification, so I suggest you not to read all the ossification on one given day only. So let's take it slowly, one by one. So right now, like today, we discussed the three bones. Next time, we'll be talking about the ossification of the lower part of radius ulna, and very, very importantly, the carpal bones, and so on in the very next section in the lower limb. So as I said, we'll be discussing it in three parts. The second part is, now we'll be looking at these schematic atlas images, where I'll be looking at some important attachments there. And these attachments will become more live when I'll show you these attachments on the real-time sections. So first guys, let us understand what important muscles are attached to these important bony prominences. And as I said, this will make more sense when you will see it in the atlas images, the cadaveric atlas images. So right now you're looking at the ventral surface of the scapula, the costal surface of the scapula. You all know about the glenoid cavity, coracoid process, acromion process. I don't have to tell you those little details here. Starting with this notch that you are looking at here at the upper border, guys, this notch here is called as a suprascapular notch. And this suprascapular notch is bridged by a ligament also. The suprascapular ligament or the transverse scapular ligament. So there's a ligament present above that. And sometimes this ligament is ossified, and because of that, if it is ossified, so it becomes bone only. So sometimes you have a foramen actually. It looks like there's a foramen in the upper part of along the upper border of the scapula. So we simply call it suprascapular foramen. And that suprascapular foramen, it actually gives passage to the suprascapular nerve, whereas a suprascapular artery will be seen going above that foramen or above the notch, you can say. So one important relation that you should know, that we have this suprascapular artery, and this here is the suprascapular nerve. So the suprascapular nerve, which comes from the upper trunk of the brachial plexus, it is the one which is going from this notch, or you can say suprascapular foramen. There's a mnemonic for this. They say that Air Force above and Navy below. A for Air Force, A is artery, Air Force above, Navy below, Navy, and nerve, Navy below. So nerve is below and artery is above. So suprascapular artery is above the notch and suprascapular nerve is through the notch or through the foramen. One thing. Second thing guys, we should know that this coracoid process, because from the anterior aspect we can appreciate the coracoid process better. Acromion process can be seen better from the posterior side. This coracoid process is giving attachment to three main muscles here, out of which one is inserted here and two are originating. The muscle which is inserted here is the pectoralis minor, and the two muscle which you will see originating will be the short head of biceps brachii and coracobrachialis. I'll be using the traditional blue and red color. You know, the red indicates the origin and the blue for the insertion, so I don't have to write that. So this is the blue color here, which is for the pectoralis minor. So guys, pectoralis minor muscle, which originates from third, fourth and fifth rib, it is attached to the coracoid process. That's why the pectoralis minor muscle has no say in the shoulder joint. Pectoralis major muscle is one of the main muscle to internally rotate the shoulder, but not pectoralis minor, because it is not attached to humerus. It is just attached to the coracoid process. And as you can see, there are two origins also to be appreciated here. The name is coracoid process. Of course, it is the origin for the coracobrachialis. It is the origin for the coracobrachialis, and very importantly, it's the origin for the short head of biceps brachii. It's the short head of the biceps brachii. People do have confusion with the short head and long head, where they're originating from and how exactly they're passing. So it's a short head of biceps brachii, which is, so these are the three muscles. If the question is asked that what are the three muscles attached to the coracoid process, it's pectoralis minor, which is inserted, coracobrachialis, and short head of biceps brachii, which is originating from here. Okay. Then we have this supraglenoid tubercle and we have this infraglenoid tubercle. The glenoid cavity, and then they have a tubercle in the upper and the lower part. The supraglenoid tubercle, if I mark this, guys, this is a supraglenoid tubercle. This supraglenoid tubercle is the origin for the long head of biceps brachii. So that's an important piece of information, that the short head of the biceps brachii is coming from the coracoid, whereas the long head of biceps brachii is from the supraglenoid tubercle. And it is coming from supraglenoid tubercle, which also helps you remember that out of these two heads, which head would be intracapsular. It's very, very close to the glenoid cavity. It's the superior. It's this one, the one which is coming from supraglenoid tubercle. The long head of biceps brachii, it's worth noting down that it is intracapsular, guys. It is intracapsular. There are a few more interesting facts about the long head. We'll be discussing that in a while. Whereas if you look at this infraglenoid tubercle, this infraglenoid tubercle is the origin for long head. Again, it's long head, but this time it's the long head of triceps. It's the long head of triceps. So remember one thing, when you're looking at glenoid cavity, supraglenoid and infraglenoid tubercle are for the long heads. Supra is for the biceps and infra is for the triceps. Long head of biceps, long head of triceps. Triceps having 3 heads. The remaining 2 heads will originate from the posterior surface of the humerus, which we will see eventually. This fossa here, guys, the subscapular fossa, as the name suggests, the subscapular fossa, the medial 2/3 of this subscapular fossa is giving origin to the subscapularis muscle. It's the origin of the subscapularis muscle, and clinically this subscapularis tendon is also called as a forgotten tendon. The subscapularis tendon is called as a forgotten tendon. They might ask this. They've asked this question earlier also. The subscapularis muscle, the tendon of this muscle, or this muscle is called as a forgotten muscle or forgotten tendon here. And what you'll see, guys, along the entire medial border, from the superior angle all the way to inferior angle, like this, along the entire medial border, there is a muscle which is inserted here. That's why I'm drawing with the blue here, and that's the insertion of the serratus anterior, which also signifies, because the serratus anterior muscle is having such an extensive insertion along the medial border of the scapula, so this keeps the medial border of scapula intact with the thoracic cage, and that's why we know that any injury to the nerve supplying it, long thoracic nerve supplies it, so any paralysis of the serratus anterior or injury to long thoracic nerve can cause the winging of scapula. Can cause the winging of scapula. Winging of scapula can also be because of other muscles which are keeping the medial border intact, like rhomboideus and trapezius, but the most prominent winging of scapula is because of the serratus anterior involvement. Long thoracic nerve supplies it. So these are some important attachments which you should know, which can be appreciated from the costal surface here. About the coracoid process attachment, you should know about the suprascapular nerve course here, the artery is above the notch, the subscapularis and pectoralis and the serratus anterior muscle, and then glenoid cavity, supraglenoid and infraglenoid tubercle. What you can do, guys, you can take a snapshot of all these. Once I'm done with all these pictures, I'll just leave them for 5 seconds in this way so that you can take a snapshot of these images. Okay. Now moving on, guys, let us turn the scapula and look at the dorsal aspect. So when you look at the dorsal surface of the scapula, there we go. So there are few very, very interesting things that we need to notice here. When you look at the dorsal surface of the scapula, obviously the spine of the scapula is the one which divides this body into the supraspinous and the infraspinous fossa. And clearly this supraspinous fossa will be giving origin to the supraspinatus. So let us say this is the origin of supraspinatus, and this here mainly is the origin of the infraspinatus here. I'll tell you some very, very interesting fact here. Supraspinatus, and this one here is the infra. We'll be discussing the insertion of these muscles in the humerus, and then I'll show you together also. Supraspinatus, this is the muscle which is responsible for the first 15 degree of abduction at the shoulder. So initiation of abduction is done by the supraspinatus. Okay. Before we go to the muscle toward the lateral border, I want you to focus on the medial border. Now, one thing if you noticed in the previous picture, guys, that the medial border of scapula on the costal surface is providing insertion to serratus anterior. Insertion. So this is a point of insertion of a muscle, the medial border. And I would recommend you to remember that medial border of the scapula is actually for insertions only, whereas lateral border of the scapula is for origins. Now, if you look at the lateral border, glenoid cavity is along the lateral border only. And what you can see along the lateral border, we have origin of, along the glenoid cavity, we have origin of the triceps and the biceps. Similarly, when you turn the scapula, this thing will remain the same. So when you look at the medial border of scapula, it is all about insertions. So what you'll see from the superior angle till the root of the spine, we have insertion of levator scapulae here. Exactly at the root of the spine here, we have insertion of rhomboideus minor, and below the spine, root of spine, till the inferior angle of the scapula, we have insertion of rhomboideus major. So this here is the levator scapulae. That's rhomboid minor, that is rhomboideus minor, and the one below. Rhomboideus minor is exactly at the root of the spine of the scapula here, and this here is the rhomboideus major. That's the origin for the rhomboideus major muscle. So one thing is clear, that every time you think of the medial border of scapula, the medial border of scapula is all about insertions. It's all about insertions, whether it's the costal surface or it is this dorsal surface. Okay, now moving more toward this lateral side. So what you'll notice that this very thick lateral border, if you compare the medial and lateral border of scapula, the lateral border is extremely thick. This lateral border of the scapula gives origin to the teres minor and the teres major muscle. Teres minor, and we got this teres major muscle. You know, if I just leave this discussion with this teres minor and major origin, and I'll not discuss the insertion, and I will not show you the picture of those insertions, then it's very difficult for us to imagine that what would be the function of these muscles. So I believe that the right way to do osteology is always to look at the two bones simultaneously, look at the origin, look at the insertion, trace the muscle fiber in the atlas, and then you can, without even reading, you can easily make out that what could be the action of that particular muscle here. So teres minor above and teres major below in the lateral border of the scapula. Acha. Before I go to the spine of the scapula, where I have a very interesting fact to tell you. Now, can you again notice this suprascapular notch? And guys, there's a notch again here. If I just again mark this, look at this notch here. Can you see that notch here? Now this notch is present between the spine of the scapula and glenoid cavity. So we call it spinoglenoidal notch. They might ask you this question without showing you the picture, that what are the contents of spinoglenoidal notch. Now guys, the same suprascapular nerve which is coming from here will actually come here and supply the infraspinatus muscle passing through this notch, and also the artery which was above will also go through this spinoglenoidal notch and will come down here. So these are suprascapular nerve and artery. When we talked about the suprascapular nerve and artery, nerve was inside the notch or in the foramen, artery was above. But when we're talking about this notch here, they both are content together. The suprascapular nerve and artery are the contents of this notch called as a spinoglenoidal notch. It's a spinoglenoidal notch. You can see it's between the spine of the scapula and the glenoid cavity. So we call it spinoglenoidal notch. And that is what is allowing these nerves and muscles to come down and supply the infraspinatus muscle as well. So suprascapular nerve not only supplies supraspinatus, obviously it will supply supraspinatus. Along with it, it also supplies infraspinatus by passing through this notch. Okay. Now coming to the interesting part I was talking about, guys. If you look at the spine of the scapula, which laterally is continuing as an acromion process, what you will see that the muscle which is inserted mostly along the upper border of the spine of the scapula and also along the medial border of the acromion process, this is the insertion for the trapezius muscle. The trapezius muscle along the upper border or the upper lip of the spine of the scapula and along the medial border of the acromion process. And then we have this extensive origin of the deltoid muscle. Deltoid muscle, middle fiber will come from this acromion process, and posterior fiber will come from the lower lip of the spine of scapula. Now I'm just going to go to that interesting part I was talking about. This is the origin of deltoid. So it is occupying, the origin is occupying middle fiber of deltoid. The multipinnate middle fiber of deltoid will come from this lateral aspect of the acromion process, and the inferior or the lower lip or lower border will provide the origin to the posterior border of the deltoid, posterior fibers of the deltoid. Anterior fiber come from the clavicle. That's a different story. What is to be noted here, guys? Look at this projection here. Okay? And look at the portion which I'm highlighting here. Now this highlighted portion is actually called as the deltoid tubercle. Now please understand this very carefully, guys. This is called as the deltoid tubercle. This is called as deltoid tubercle, not deltoid tuberosity. First of all, deltoid tuberosity is present on the humerus, on the lateral side of the shaft of the humerus. This is deltoid tubercle of the scapulum. Now, when the name is deltoid tubercle, it gives an indication, okay, deltoid tubercle should be for the deltoid muscle attachment. No, it's not. Deltoid tubercle is actually providing insertion to the middle fiber of trapezius. That's the point here, guys. This is the one which is providing insertion to the middle fibers of trapezius muscle. So that is a question which is worth asking. The deltoid tubercle of scapula gives attachment to what muscle? That is trapezius. More precisely, it's the middle fiber of trapezius which are responsible for the retraction of the scapula. So they are the one which are attached to this deltoid tubercle on the spine of the scapula. So these are some important osteological aspects that you should know about the of the scapula here. So we saw the costal surface, some muscle on the costal surface, and now we are looking at the muscle on the dorsal surface. Some along the medial border, which are only insertions, some along the lateral border, which are origins. Supra and the infraspinatus are above and below the spine. Okay. Chalo guys, moving on. The next bone that we'll be considering here is the humerus. Now, as I said, I'm discussing these bones separately. Once I'm done with the humerus, then I'll show you the muscle together. Now, you're looking at the upper end of the humerus. We already discussed the ossification. We have three centers for ossification, secondary center of ossification, one for the head, one for this greater tubercle, one for lesser tubercle. Now, this let me use this picture first, not for the attachment, but for the groove here. This groove between the greater tubercle and lesser tubercle, this is called as the bicipital groove. We all know that intertubercular sulcus or bicipital groove. Now, if you remember the long head of biceps, which was originating from the supraglenoid tubercle. Now guys, if I just for your sake, if I just draw this glenoid cavity, let's say this is a glenoid cavity here. So this is a supraglenoid tubercle there. And this supraglenoid tubercle is giving origin to the long head of biceps, which is intracapsular. And then what you'll see, that head will go through this bicipital groove like this. That's the reason we call it bicipital groove, because the long head of biceps is actually passing through it. Short head will come straight. Long head is the one which has to go toward the lateral side. So one thing which is clearly present in the bicipital groove is the long head of biceps brachii. I'm writing BB. What else? Obviously, along with its synovial sheath, there will be synovial sheath. Synovial sheath is the one which will prevent the friction when this tendon will slide in this sulcus, in the intertubercular sulcus. And not only that, there is an artery called as anterior circumflex humeral artery. It's a branch from the third part of axillary artery. So guys, let us say this here is the axillary artery here. If this is the axillary artery, and more precisely third part of axillary artery. So this is the branch coming from the axillary artery called as anterior circumflex humeral artery. So what you will see, there is one branch of this anterior circumflex humeral artery which will be ascending in this bicipital groove only like this. And that is called as an ascending branch. This is ascending branch of ACHA, anterior circumflex humeral artery. So in the bicipital groove or in the intertubercular sulcus, we have three main content. We got this ascending branch of ACHA. There is a long head of biceps brachii, and we also got the synovial sheath which is covering this long head. Three contents in this intertubercular sulcus or bicipital groove. But they also can ask you this question, that what is actually preventing this long head of the biceps to slip out of this bicipital groove or intertubercle sulcus? So there must be some ligament which is actually holding this tendon there, and that is a ligament which is stretching between the two tubercles here, the greater and lesser tubercle. This ligament, guys, which is covering these contents, and it's keeping this long head within this bicipital groove, is called as a transverse humeral ligament. This here is the transverse humeral ligament. So that again could be a question, that this is the ligament which prevents the nipping of this long head of biceps brachii from the bicipital groove. Long head of the biceps brachii, because it is running toward the lateral side in the sulcus and then descending downward. So basically it's a support for the shoulder joint also on the lateral aspect. And what is keeping this support intact in the groove is this ligament called as transverse humeral ligament. So I use this picture to discuss about that, what are the content of the groove and what is actually keeping that intact in there. Now let me see again one more picture here, in which we'll be looking at some important attachments of the upper end of the humerus along with the shaft here. Now we saw that costal surface of scapula was having the muscle subscapularis, and guys, subscapularis muscle will be occupying this lesser tubercle. So this is the lesser tubercle here, and the muscle inserted here, that's why I'm using the blue color here. The muscle inserted here is the subscapularis. Remember that forgotten muscle, the subscapularis muscle? This is the one which is attached to this lesser tubercle. I'm writing LT, that is lesser tubercle. The greater tubercle, which can be appreciated better from the lateral side actually. This greater tubercle is actually having three facets on it. These facets are not very well visible from the anterior aspect. That's a view from the anterior side, but just I'm drawing it for this completion's sake. So we have three muscles which are inserted, and you can remember those three muscles in a sequence from this only, guys. If I just take you back to this picture here, look at the three muscles here. That's supraspinatus, which is here, infraspinatus, and then we have teres minor. Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor. Look at these three muscles in this sequence. They're all three converging from the posterior side and going and inserting to the so-called SIT muscles, SIT. The S is for the supraspinatus, of course. Supraspinatus. Infraspinatus, and T is for the teres minor. These muscles, all these muscles, like one on the greater tubercle and lesser tubercle and three on the greater tubercle, they are all present on the greater tubercle. These are the muscles of the rotator cuff. Obviously, they are all surrounding the shoulder joint, and they are the rotator cuff muscle. The four muscles in the rotator cuff: supraspinatus at the top, infraspinatus, teres minor behind, and the one in front is the subscapularis here. We also call them the steering muscles. You know what do you mean by steering muscles, guys? Because they steer the humerus. If this is a humeral head here, it can be steered, it can be medially rotated, and it can be laterally rotated by these muscles here. We already said supraspinatus muscle, so I don't have to go into that. Supraspinatus muscle is for the 0 to 15 degree of abduction. That's a initiation of abduction. But subscapularis is a medial rotator or internal rotator, you can say. Whereas infraspinatus and teres minor, because they are present posteriorly, so every time these muscles contract, the humerus will rotate outside like this. If this is my right humerus here, so the muscles are present on the posterior side, and then when they contract, they will allow this humerus to rotate in this direction. That is external rotation here. So infraspinatus and teres minor, even teres major is also external rotator, but we'll teres major has a different role. I'm sorry. Infraspinatus and teres minor, these are the external rotator, or you can say lateral rotator. And that is one interesting fact to remember. The teres minor and teres major, they both are originating like one above and one below, but their function is exactly opposite. Teres minor is for the lateral rotation, but teres major will be for the medial rotation, and that you will understand by looking at one of the picture which I'll show you after this. But guys, look at this. In the floor of this bicipital groove, we have three muscles which are present here. one on the lateral lip of the bicipital groove, one in the floor of the bicipital groove, and one on the medial lip of the bicipital groove. A very famous mnemonic for this, we call it a lady between two major. Lady between two major. So we have a major on the lateral side, we have a major on the medial side, and the lady is between. So what is this M here on the medial side? On the medial side, on the lateral side, I'm sorry, that is the pectoralis major. Followed by the latissimus dorsi, insertion of latissimus dorsi, and the most medial attachment here is for the teres major. Now I want you to take your attention to this teres major and teres minor thing, guys. See, look at me, guys. Let's say if this is my humerus here, the right humerus, although teres minor and teres major, they are originating, one is above and one is below from the lateral border. But what teres minor was doing, it was actually going behind the humerus on the greater tubercle, behind the humerus on greater tubercle. So every time this muscle will contract, the humerus will rotate in this direction. So there is an external rotation. Teres major muscle, which is originating from below, it is not going behind. It is coming in front of the humerus and attached to the medial lip of bicipital groove. So it is coming in front. So that muscle is for what? Medial rotation. So although the muscle origin is more or less same, one above, one below, both from the lateral border, but they are antagonistic muscle. Both are doing adduction. They both help in the adduction at the shoulder joint. But apart from adduction, major is for the medial rotator, the teres major, and teres minor is for the lateral rotation at the shoulder joint. What is also to be noted, although these prominences are not very clearly seen, that we have a tuberosity present on the lateral side in the middle of the shaft of the humerus, and that tuberosity is called as a deltoid tuberosity. Deltoid tuberosity. So guys, please don't confuse the deltoid tuberosity of humerus with the deltoid tubercle of the scapula. Deltoid tubercle of scapula was for the attachment of middle fiber of trapezius. Deltoid tuberosity of the humerus, which is on the lateral side of shaft of the humerus, it obviously is for the insertion of deltoid muscle. So it's the deltoid muscle fiber which will be coming and inserting here. And exactly opposite to deltoid tuberosity, on the medial side of the shaft of the humerus, although there is no tuberosity over there, but we have insertion of coracobrachialis. This origin of the coracobrachialis muscle. So laterally in the middle of the shaft of the humerus, deltoid is inserted, and exactly on the medial side here, the coracobrachialis. You know, all these small and big informations are important, because if I take a section from the lower end of the lower half of this arm, so you need to anticipate that what will be seen and what will not be seen. Transverse section usually confuse people because they don't anticipate that what will be seen and what will not be seen there. We just directly start trying to identify the structures here. So if a section is taken from the lower part of the arm, obviously the deltoid muscle and coracobrachialis will not be seen. Bicep will be seen, tricep will be seen, but deltoid and coracobrachialis will not be seen. And one additional muscle will be seen in the lower part, which is not seen in the upper part, the muscle which originates from the lower part of anterior surface of shaft of humerus, and that is the brachialis muscle. This is showing it only partly here, guys. The brachialis muscle will originate from here and from the lower part, from the anterior lateral and anterior medial surface of the shaft of the humerus. That muscle will be the brachialis muscle. So for that, let me take you to the lower part. But before we go to the lateral part, how about we just turn this and see it from the posterior aspect. Yeah. Once again, the same humerus we are looking at, upper end only. That's upper end and the upper shaft here. Now this time what you see, the view is from the posterior side, and I hope you can very clearly appreciate this groove, which is called as a radial groove or the spiral groove. This is a radial groove and spiral groove. We all know that radial nerve, it leaves the axilla and then enters into this spiral groove to appear on the lateral side, where it again pierces the lateral intermuscular septum. And accompanying this radial nerve is the artery that is a profunda brachii artery. So that's the radial groove or spiral groove, because it is spirally present. And what you can see in the radial and the spiral groove, we got the radial nerve and profunda brachii artery. Profunda brachii vessels, basically artery, vein, both will be there. So profunda brachii vessels. The reason I'm showing you this posterior surface of the shaft of the humerus, because this spiral groove is basically dividing the posterior surface of humerus in two parts. Upper lateral part, which is small, you can see that's a small upper lateral part here. If I may highlight this here, this one. And lower part, which is medial to the spiral groove, which is way larger. I mean, it's like occupying rest everything below. So it's a big lower part here. Upper lateral part is smaller, lower medial part is larger. So it is dividing the posterior surface of shaft of humerus in mainly these two parts. This upper lateral part is giving origin to the lateral head of triceps. So we already saw that long head of triceps was coming from the infraglenoid tubercle. This is the lateral head of triceps, which originates above the radial groove, which is the area which is more lateral on the shaft. That's why it's lateral head. And the one which is present more medial and below the radial groove or spiral groove, this is giving origin to the medial head of triceps. And undoubtedly, that is why the medial head of the triceps is the largest head. It's the largest head, guys. I mean, I'm going to show it in the picture also. It's the largest head. It's a huge origin, you will see. Imagine, just leave this area above the spiral groove. Everything on the posterior surface of shaft of the humerus below the spiral groove is giving origin to this big head of the triceps, the medial head. And in fact, that is the reason it is supplied by the radial nerve twice. It is supplied by the radial nerve in the axilla here. It will give off a branch in the axilla to this head. In the axilla, and it again supplies into the spiral groove as well. So the medial head of the tricep is supplied twice, once in the axilla, one in the spiral groove. Well, that's mainly about the upper end of the humerus. So we saw the anterior aspect and the posterior aspect. This posterior aspect, the greater tubercle, can be seen more clearly. You can see the facet here. Look at this facet here, the inferior facet, the middle facet, superior facet is more above. So this obviously is for the teres minor, this is for the infraspinatus, and supraspinatus is even higher here. Okay. So guys, from the humerus, let's now, from the upper end of the humerus, let's move on to the lower end here. The muscle which is attached at the lower end are obviously supposed to go to the radius and ulna, which is our discussion the next time. All the flexors and the extensors of the forearm. So right now what we can see, that we can see the medial and the lateral. See, we already know this is capitulum here, and this pulley shape is the trochlea. Okay. Now what you see, this epicondyle is the lateral epicondyle. It's the, you can see it's smaller also, and this more prominent epicondyle, this one is a medial epicondyle. So there's some interesting fact that you should remember from here. Above the capitulum there is a fossa, above the trochlea there is a fossa, and when you turn the humerus, again above the trochlea on the posterior side there is a fossa. So there are three fossa which you'll appreciate in the lower end of the humerus. The one above the capitulum, that is called as the radial fossa. The one above the trochlea is called as the coronoid fossa. And this obviously here is the olecranon fossa. What's the importance, guys? What are these fossas all about? The radial fossa above the capitulum, because remember below the capitulum was the radial head. In the flexion of the elbow joint, the circumference of the head of the radius, it needs some space to accommodate inside. If there is no fossa above this capitulum portion, then your flexion will not be able to complete, because the radial head will actually engage with the lower end of the humerus here. So this fossa is actually adapting or accommodating the radial head inside, a part of radial head inside, and that increases the range of motion in the elbow. The same is with the coronoid fossa. Coronoid fossa is above the trochlea. So it is actually accommodating the coronoid process of the ulna. So while we do the flexion, these processes, they get the space to actually go inside the humerus, and the range of motion of the elbow reaches normal. Same posterior side. Posteriorly we have olecranon fossa. In the extension, the olecranon process of the ulna is allowed to go inside this olecranon fossa, and that again allows the complete extension of 180 degree at the elbow here. So that's what these fossas are for. They accommodate some bony prominences in the flexion and the extension. When it comes to the capsule, the capsular attachment, the capsule of the elbow joint, which again we will talk about in the next discussion, guys. The capsule of the elbow joint will be accommodating these fossa. Capitulum and trochlea are obviously inside only, but these radial fossa and the coronoid fossa are inside. They're intracapsular, not the epicondyles. And similarly, olecranon fossa is also inside the capsule. If this green line here corresponds to the capsule, so I can say that capitulum, trochlea, olecranon fossa, radial fossa and coronoid fossa are all intracapsular. They are all intracapsular. Let me just highlight. Let's say these are all dipped in the synovium here. They are all intracapsular. Whereas clearly the medial epicondyle and lateral epicondyle, they are extracapsular. They are outside the capsule. Needless to say that lateral epicondyle is also called as a common extensor origin. Everyone knows that. That is a common extensor origin here. It's a common extensor origin. And medial epicondyle is referred as a common flexor origin. You know that inflammation of these processes can cause the tennis elbow and the student's elbow, tennis elbow and the golfer's elbow. That is lateral epicondylitis and medial epicondylitis. The common extensor origin and common flexor origin doesn't mean that they are giving origin to every single flexor and extensor of the forearm. Like some flexor and some extensor are coming from above these epicondyle also, and you know that also lays the foundation of understanding the muscle in the forearm. When you talk about the muscle like brachioradialis and muscles like extensor carpi radialis longus, regarding their innervation, you will also understand few important facts if you understand their attachment. So insertion I will be talking about in the next part, guys. Above the lateral epicondyle, what you will see, there is the origin of two muscle here from the lateral supracondylar ridge. It's a ridge here. That's a lateral supracondylar ridge. This lateral supracondylar ridge in the upper part, that is giving origin to the muscle called as brachioradialis. That's the origin of the muscle brachioradialis. And this again, the lower part of lateral supracondylar ridge is giving origin to the extensor carpi radialis longus. Extensor carpi radialis longus. We need to correlate these attachments. It's just not that they're present on the bone, so we have to remember that. There has to be something about them. You know, because these muscles, they do not have attachment to lateral epicondyle, and lateral epicondyle is a landmark where the radial nerve will divide into the posterior interosseous nerve and the superficial branch. So that means brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis longus, these two muscles are supplied by the main trunk of the radial nerve. They're supplied by the main trunk of radial nerve before radial nerve divides, because the division is actually in front of lateral epicondyle, and these muscles have a higher origin, so they're supplied there only. Whereas when you see on the medial side also, one important muscle that you should remember is the pronator teres muscle. Pronator teres muscle is having two heads. One is called as a humeral head, this one, and then when you have a ulnar head, ulnar head will obviously come from ulna only, that is in the lower part. So pronator teres humeral head or upper head, you can say, that is the one which originates from the medial supracondylar ridge, the medial supracondylar ridge. That's about the some important features of the lower part of the, and as we already said, this region will be giving origin to the brachialis muscle. This part here will be giving origin to the brachialis muscle. Brachialis muscle is seen originating from the lower part of anterior surface of the shaft of the humerus. So guys, we discussed this enough of osteology that we need for the scapula and the humerus, about their ossification and the attachments. Now let us finally let me show you some pictures, and it's your turn. By knowing these muscle attachment, you can identify these muscles where they're attached on the scapula and what their action would be. Okay, so I'm going to put some pictures for you here, and I'll start with this one here, and then I'll show you some cadaveric pictures also. So first I wanted to focus only on the muscle which are attached from the vertebrae to the to the scapula here. So this here is the medial border of the scapula, right? This is obviously the medial border of the scapula, and we said medial border of the scapula is known for insertions. So there will be the muscle for the inserting here, that is levator scapulae. Can't be seen here, levator scapulae is not shown here. That will be coming like this, levator scapulae, and inserting somewhere here. But you can clearly see the rhomboideus minor muscle. Look at the one which I'm highlighting here, that is rhomboideus minor. And this one here is a rhomboideus major. And clearly when these muscles will contract, they are pulling the medial border of scapula toward the vertebral column. So they are the retractors. Rhomboideus minor and major both are the retractors here. Another important feature which I wanted to understand in this picture only, see the muscle which will be covering it all is the trapezius muscle. The trapezius muscle will be something like this. It will be running in this manner. So that is covering everything here. Trapezius is supplied by what nerve? Spinal accessory nerve. So if you're looking at a nerve in this region, if it's a cadaveric picture, so if you see a nerve running in this region, and you will be seeing that nerve running like this along the medial border and supplying the trapezius muscle, that obviously is the spinal accessory nerve coming from the posterior triangle of the neck. And if you see a nerve again running along the medial border but passing deep to this rhomboideus minor, levator scapulae, rhomboideus major, all these muscles like them, and supplying them also, that nerve will be dorsal scapular nerve. So that's a hint, guys. You might see a cadaveric picture in which you will see two nerves running along the medial border of scapula. You have to understand the nerve which is running superficial to this rhomboideus minor major is to supply the trapezius muscle, which is even more superficial. The nerve which is running deep to the rhomboideus minor, major and levator scapulae is supplying rhomboideus minor, major and levator scapulae, and that is dorsal scapular nerve that will be running deep to these muscles along the medial border. Similarly, the muscle that you see here, that is we already know that is a supraspinatus muscle coming from supraspinous fossa. This one is an infraspinatus muscle here, look at that, and that's a teres minor muscle. This one here is a teres minor muscle. This whole thing is infraspinatus, infraspinatus. It's a big muscle, infraspinatus, and this one is the teres minor. So the S, I, and T, the sit muscles, supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and teres minor muscle inserted to greater tubercle. And can you see that we said teres major muscle will originate from below only, from the same lateral border, but you can see it is not going on the posterior side, it is moving forward. You can see this teres major muscle is going in front of the shaft of the humerus to attach to the medial lip of bicipital groove, and that's why it was a medial rotator, unlike the teres minor. How about if we see some pictures here? Look at that, guys. That's a real-time section. Now in this real-time section, what you see, the trapezius is cut here. That's a trapezius muscle. You can see the trapezius fibers are being cut here. This is the medial border of the scapula, and along the medial border of the scapula, you can appreciate the muscle. This is the levator scapula. I'll be writing in short here. We have rhomboideus minor muscle, and this big one is a rhomboideus major muscle. The three muscle, as we already discussed, attached along the medial border. Minor was at the root of the spine of the scapula. Major was from the root till the inferior angle. And they're all covered. When the trapezius muscle is intact here, obviously you will not be able to see any of these muscles here. And for that, let me, if I turn it over, if I turn this, if I turn and look at the muscle from the anterior aspect, the muscle that you saw originating from the anterior or the costal surface of scapula, that was a subscapularis muscle, which looks something like this. It looks like many muscles are there, it's one muscle only. It is converging so heavily in this lesser tubercle. Not this one, guys. This is the picture of the posterior aspect only. Anterior aspect picture is below. Let me just show you one more picture here. The muscle which are coming from scapula to the humerus. Once again, you can see above the scapula, above the spine of the scapula, the supraspinatus. This whole thing. Look at this entire thing is infraspinatus, having a very broad origin, and the muscle it's a triangular muscle. It is converging toward the greater tubercle. That's why it looks like there are 2-3 muscles, but it's a single muscle only, that is infraspinatus. And this here is the teres minor. Any guesses what muscle this would be? This one. Now what you can see, this muscle is coming from the glenoid cavity, but the lower part of glenoid cavity. So it is infraglenoid tubercle, and that's why it is the only head of triceps coming from the scapula, that is long head. It's a long head of triceps. So that's another way of identifying the teres minor and teres major, because teres minor is passing behind the long head of the triceps. Teres major muscle will start from here, and that will go in front, that because this view is from the posterior side. So teres major muscle will go in front of this long head, and then obviously will come to the anterior surface of the shaft of the humerus. That clearly is what muscle? That is a subscapularis muscle. Just pay attention to this muscle only, guys. That is a subscapularis muscle. The one muscle coming from the medial 2/3 of subscapular fossa, and the only muscle which is inserted to the lesser tubercle. That is a subscapularis. Forget about rest of the muscle. This is latissimus dorsi muscle and all that. Just focus only on the subscapularis. This is subscapularis, and let me show you a cadaveric picture of subscapularis. That's how it looked like. See, you cannot see any spine of scapula here, so there should not be confusion between whether it's the anterior or the posterior end. This definitely is the anterior view, and from the entire subscapular fossa, look at this big muscle all converging here to this lesser tubercle, the subscapularis. The muscle which helps in the adduction, it helps in the medial rotation also, the subscapularis. Now from vertebroscapular and the scapulohumeral muscle, let's move on to this part. Then I'll show you real time for this. Now guys, again just to show you that we said coracoid process, if I remind you again, coracoid process was giving attachment to 3 muscle and 2 were originating there. Which 2 were originating? These 2. Now this is the short head. Can you see that? If I just, that's a short head of biceps brachii, and look at this long head of biceps brachii. That's a long head of biceps brachii coming from supraglenoid tubercle, and then from this bicipital groove also. You can see it is running in the bicipital groove. So the one tendon that you see running straight from the coracoid process, that is the short head, and the one which is taking the pathway between from this bicipital groove, more laterally placed and also supporting the humerus from the lateral side, is a long head of biceps brachii. And deep to the short head, now look at this, that's important. Deep to the short head, can you appreciate another muscle there? Let me just highlight that muscle here. There's another muscle which is inserted to the medial side of shaft of humerus. This is the coracobrachialis. That's coracobrachialis. This, needless to say, it's bicep brachii muscle, and that is coracobrachialis. And you know, musculocutaneous nerve, as we all know, is the one which supplies all these muscles of anterior compartment of arm. That musculocutaneous nerve, if I see MC and I'm writing, musculocutaneous nerve coming from the lateral cord of brachial plexus will actually pierce the coracobrachialis muscle, and then it will actually pass deep to this biceps brachii in front of the brachialis, and then continue the journey beyond the cubital fossa also. We'll discuss that in the next part. So just to tell you that how exactly musculocutaneous nerve enters the anterior compartment of arm, it is entering by piercing and obviously supplying which muscle? Coracobrachialis. If I got to show you one comparative picture for this, there's the one. Look at that. Now I hope once you see the deltoid fibers are being removed, see, it's always a good idea to look at some schematic atlas picture and then you look at the cadaveric pictures, because looking at the cadaveric picture directly will probably not make an exact the dimensional view for you. Now can you see this head is present more laterally here? So that is a long head, and the one head which is coming from coracoid process, that is a short head. That's a short head of the biceps brachii. So the 1, 2 I'm highlighting, that's long head more laterally, L for lateral, L for long. Long head is more laterally placed. And look at this muscle present deep to it. This is coracobrachialis muscle. And then you can see the rest of the coracobrachialis. Let me just rub this off. The rest of the coracobrachialis muscle is actually passing deep to the short head only. And this biceps brachii muscle will be inserted to the radial tuberosity. We are not discussing that part today. We'll be seeing in the next part. It goes to the radial tuberosity and also forms a bicipital aponeurosis. Once I remove this biceps brachii short head, if I remove the biceps brachii short head, I don't know if I have that picture with me here. No, I don't. But guys, there are pictures which are given in the atlas in which they've removed the short head of biceps brachii to show the coracobrachialis muscle more clearly. Obviously, it will be seen more clearly. And if you remove the entire biceps brachii, I will also see a muscle originating from this region here, like this, and then going below to the ulnar tuberosity. And what muscle was that? That was a brachialis muscle. But that can be seen only when the biceps brachii is removed. I don't have that picture with me right now. So biceps brachii, remove that and you can see the brachialis muscle. You remove the short head of biceps brachii only and you can see the entire coracobrachialis muscle there. Finally, let me just show you these two more pictures here to wrap up the session for the day. If you'll see from the posterior side, guys, look at this muscle. That's a triceps muscle, right? Now, this is the long, see what they've done in this picture is they've actually dissected it. They've actually opened it up. This here is the long head. This here is the long head coming from the long head of triceps coming from above. The one which will be originating from this upper part here, that will be the lateral head. This will be the lateral head here. And the medial head will be seen, which is in this region. Once you cut this part, if I cut this portion between the lateral head and the medial head, then number one, the radial groove will be exposed. And number two, you can clearly see the differentiation between the lateral head and the medial head. This is long head and that is a lateral head. Let me show you that picture in which if I put an incision, guys, if I put an incision between like this, so I can expose the radial groove, I can see the content of the radial groove, and I can also see the lateral and the medial head separated like in this image. Now, you can very clearly see this here is the reflected lateral head here. This is the largest medial head, and this exposed groove in between is the spiral groove or radial groove, and where you can appreciate the radial nerve. You can see the radial nerve is running there, and deeply you can see the profunda brachii vessels are also present. So you have to cut through this long head obliquely so that you can separate the lateral head and the medial head to see the spiral groove in a more clear manner. So guys, that is it for the day. So this is the first part of osteology in which we talked about the ossification of the scapula, clavicle, the humerus, some very important points over there. We talked about some bony prominences, bony features of the scapula and humerus, some important fossas and grooves there, their contents, and how to identify the muscles which are vertebroscapular muscle and the scapulohumeral muscles. Next week, as per we'll see that what exactly the time is. Probably it's Monday. Next week again we'll meet in this live session where we'll be talking about the rest of the bone. We'll talk about the radius and ulna. We'll talk about the carpals and the metacarpals and the phalanges. We'll talk about their ossification. We'll talk about some important bony prominences, and we have loads of muscles in the forearm and hand. So next session will be more extensive. So, and that will complete the osteology part for the upper limb. So I hope you found this session useful. If yes, then please comment in the section, put your questions also, and we'll meet next week. Good night.